I came home 3 days early from a business trip and found a little girl's pink backpack hanging on a hook inside my house. The problem, I don't have children, at least I didn't, and neither did my husband, or so I thought. For about 10 seconds, I genuinely believed I was standing in the wrong house. That's how surreal the moment felt. I remember staring at that backpack, bright pink, covered in cartoon butterflies, a tiny keychain hanging from the zipper, completely out of place, completely impossible, and somehow, that backpack ended up destroying my entire life, but not in the way you're probably thinking, because when people hear double life, they immediately imagine another woman, another marriage, another family. And yes, those things were involved. The truth was much bigger than that, much stranger, much darker, and by the time I uncovered all of it, I realized something terrifying. I never really knew my husband at all. My name is Rebecca. I'm 41 years old, and for 12 years I believed I was married to a man named Adam. Technically I was. The problem was that Adam seemed to be married to someone else too. The crazy part, I wasn't the first wife. I was the second one. I just didn't know it yet. The story started 6 months before I found the backpack. Back when my marriage still looked perfect, at least from the outside. Adam and I had been together 14 years, married for 12. No children, not by choice. Life simply never lined up the way we planned. First it was money, then careers, then timing, then health complications, then more timing. Eventually enough years passed that the conversation stopped happening, not because we stopped caring, because disappointment became exhausting. Still, our marriage felt solid, comfortable, stable. We traveled, worked hard, spent weekends together, had inside jokes, shared routines, the ordinary things that make a marriage feel safe. I trusted him completely, and that's important because people always ask the same question after stories like this. Weren't there signs? Yes, there were signs, thousands of them. The problem is that signs only become obvious after you know what they mean. Before that, they're just details, harmless details. The first sign appeared nearly 3 years before everything collapsed. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Adam started taking phone calls outside, not every call, just certain ones. I noticed it one evening during dinner. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then immediately stood up. "I'll be right back." Normal enough, except he went outside. Not another room, outside. I remember watching through the window. He paced the backyard while talking. 15 minutes later he returned, smiling, relaxed, no explanation. I asked who called. He answered immediately. Work. Simple, convincing. Reasonable, end of conversation, or at least it should have been. The problem was that it kept happening, again, and again, and again. Certain calls always required privacy. Work calls, supposedly. Then came the business trips. That's where things really started changing. Adam worked in logistics management. His company expanded rapidly. Travel increased, not unusual, at least initially. Then the frequency became ridiculous. 3 days here, 4 days there. A week somewhere else. Another conference, another meeting, another emergency, always something. I remember joking one night that I saw his suitcase more often than I saw him. He laughed, but something about the laugh felt forced. At the time, I ignored it. Big mistake. Actually, ignoring things became my specialty. The funny thing is that I considered myself observant. Friends always described me that way. Careful, detail-oriented, perceptive. Apparently none of those skills work when love gets involved. Love creates blind spots. Huge ones. The second sign arrived through something much stranger. Receipts, not suspicious receipts, just odd ones. Coffee shops, restaurants, stores. Places nowhere near where Adam claimed to be. The first time I noticed it happened completely by accident. I was cleaning his car. Something I'd done 100 times. An old receipt fell from the center console. I glanced at it, then frowned. The location was wrong, completely wrong. According to Adam, he'd been in Chicago that day. The receipt came from a small town nearly 3 hours away. I remember showing it to him later, laughing, thinking he'd explain it. Instead he looked surprised, very surprised, then immediately recovered. Layover, simple answer, reasonable answer. I accepted it, because that's what trusting spouses do. We accept answers, even when something feels slightly off, especially when something feels slightly off. Looking back, that reaction bothers me most. Not his lie, my willingness to believe it, because deep down, I knew it didn't make sense. But trusting someone means constantly choosing the version of reality that hurts less. At least until reality forces another choice. Then there was the birthday. The birthday should have exposed everything. It really should have. Adam forgot our anniversary once, forgot my birthday twice, but somehow never forgot March 17th, ever, every year. March 17th mattered, a lot. He'd become weirdly protective of that date. Whenever I asked why, he'd laugh, call it superstition, some old personal tradition, nothing important, except it clearly was important. One year he cancelled an entire vacation because it conflicted with March 17th. Another year he drove 4 hours during a snowstorm just to be somewhere specific on that date. Always alone, always private, always unexplained. The behavior was bizarre, yet somehow I normalized it, because humans can normalize almost anything if given enough time. Then came my promotion, the promotion that accidentally destroyed his entire secret life. I worked as a regional marketing director. Good job, demanding job, the kind of position that occasionally required travel. 6 months before everything exploded, I received a major promotion, more responsibility, more travel, more income. Adam seemed thrilled, supportive, excited, the perfect husband, at least on the surface. The reality, my increased travel created opportunities he'd been waiting for. At first I didn't notice. How could I? I was busy, flying constantly, managing teams, living out of hotels, normal career stuff. Meanwhile, Adam's behavior became stranger. Phone always nearby, new passwords, sudden privacy, subtle distance, nothing dramatic, just enough. Then one night something happened, something I still think about. I was staying in Denver for work. Couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning I called Adam, just because. Married people do that. Sometimes you miss someone, sometimes you want to hear their voice. Simple, normal. The call went straight to voicemail, no big deal, except the second call did too. And the third. Then his phone powered off completely. Interesting, very interesting. I remember lying awake staring at the ceiling, trying to think of explanations. Dead battery, poor signal, sleeping, anything. Everything. The next morning Adam called back, sounded perfectly normal, perfectly relaxed, claimed his phone died. End of mystery, or so I told myself. The real turning point arrived 3 weeks later, at a company dinner, one of those corporate events where people drink too much and accidentally tell the truth. A dangerous combination. I was speaking with one of Adam's former co-workers. Nice guy, talkative, clearly intoxicated. Eventually he asked about Adam, then casually said something strange, very strange. So he finally stopped commuting. I frowned. What? The guy looked confused, then immediately uncomfortable. The kind of uncomfortable that appears when somebody realizes they've made a mistake. Aren't you guys still living near Pine Grove? Silence, complete silence, because I had never heard those words before. Pine Grove. I had absolutely no idea what Pine Grove was. The coworker suddenly started backtracking, changing subjects, apologizing, acting weird, very weird. By the end of the conversation my stomach hurt because for the first time, something felt genuinely wrong, not suspicious. Wrong, like I was missing a piece of information everybody else already had. That feeling stayed with me for weeks. Then I made a decision, a simple decision, one tiny decision that would eventually uncover everything. I planned to surprise Adam. My business trip to Seattle was supposed to last 7 days. Instead, I finished early, 3 days early. I remember feeling excited, actually excited. I imagined his reaction. The surprise, dinner together, unexpected time at home, normal married couple stuff. Funny how quickly life changes. Because 3 hours after landing, I pulled into my driveway, walked through my front door, and found that pink backpack hanging on the wall. The backpack wasn't the only thing that didn't belong there, not even close. It was simply the first thing I noticed, and once I started looking around, the lies became impossible to ignore. For about 30 seconds I stood in my entryway staring at that pink backpack. Not moving, not thinking, just staring. Because the human brain does something strange when reality suddenly stops making sense. It stalls. Like a computer trying to process impossible information. I kept waiting for a logical explanation to appear. Maybe a neighbor stopped by, maybe a relative visited, maybe I was missing something obvious. The problem was, none of those explanations worked. Adam and I didn't have children, neither did our close friends, neither did our relatives nearby. There was absolutely no reason for a little girl's backpack to be hanging inside my house, yet there it was, bright pink, covered in butterflies, real, very real. I slowly walked toward it, touched it, actually touched it, as if physical contact might somehow make the situation more understandable. It didn't. If anything, it made it worse. The backpack felt used, loved, not new, not recently purchased. The fabric showed wear around the straps. A small section near the zipper had been stitched back together. Somebody had repaired it, somebody cared about it. And suddenly an uncomfortable thought appeared. This wasn't something brought into the house yesterday. This looked familiar. established like it belonged there. That realization made my stomach tighten. I looked around the entryway, and that's when I noticed the shoes. Tiny shoes, children's shoes, sitting neatly beside the wall. I froze again, because somehow I'd missed them initially. 2 pairs, one pink, one white, small enough to fit a child around 6 or 7 years old. My heart started pounding. Not because I understood what was happening, because I didn't, and not understanding was becoming terrifying. I pulled out my phone, considered calling Adam, then stopped. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. The instinct that had been whispering for years was suddenly screaming. For once, I listened. Instead of calling him, I started looking around. Carefully, slowly, methodically. The living room looked normal, mostly, same furniture, same television, same photographs, same decorations. Then I noticed a stuffed rabbit, small stuffed rabbit, sitting on the couch, definitely not ours. I picked it up, looked at it, then put it back down. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar, like somebody had built a replica of my life and gotten certain details wrong. I moved toward the kitchen, and that's where things became impossible to ignore. There was a drawing attached to the refrigerator, a child's drawing, crayon, stick figures, bright colors, simple, the kind of artwork parents proudly display. My eyes immediately found the words written across the top. Me and Daddy. Silence, complete silence. The world seemed to stop. I remember reading the words again, then again, then again, each time hoping they would somehow change. They didn't. The drawing showed a little girl holding hands with a man. Above the man was written, Daddy, not Adam, not Uncle Adam, Daddy, Daddy. The word echoed inside my head. I felt dizzy, actually dizzy. I sat down at the kitchen table because I suddenly wasn't sure my legs would cooperate. Then I noticed something else. The refrigerator, magnets, photographs, schedules, normal family stuff. Except none of it belonged to my family. There were school notices, children's activity schedules, handwritten reminders, doctor appointments. Everywhere I looked, evidence kept appearing. Evidence of a life I knew nothing about, a complete life, a hidden life, and somehow, it had been happening inside my own house. I don't know how long I sat there, 10 minutes, maybe 20, time felt strange. Eventually I forced myself to stand, because one question kept repeating inside my head. If there's a child, where is she, and who is her mother? The obvious answer was cheating, an affair, another woman, simple, terrible, but simple. The problem was, the evidence didn't feel simple. Affairs are usually messy, temporary, chaotic. This felt organized, permanent, established like a family. The thought made me sick. I started opening drawers, cabinets, closets, everywhere, and every room offered another piece of the puzzle. Children's medicine inside a bathroom cabinet, hair ties in the guest room, storybooks inside a storage basket, tiny blankets, tiny toys, tiny pieces of a life I knew absolutely nothing about. The guest room stopped me cold, because it wasn't a guest room anymore. Not really. Someone had transformed it, quietly, gradually, without me noticing. There were children's books stacked beside the bed, a nightlight plugged into the wall, cartoon bedsheets folded neatly inside a closet. The room looked temporary, but not new, not experimental, routine, used, and that's when the realization hit me. This wasn't occasional, this wasn't recent. Whoever this child was, she'd been here many times, many. My chest tightened, because suddenly a horrifying possibility emerged. What if this wasn't Adam's mistress? What if this was something much larger? Then I found the photograph. One photograph, face down inside a drawer, almost hidden, almost. I picked it up, turned it over, and everything changed. The picture showed Adam, smiling, standing beside a little girl the same age as the drawing suggested. Maybe 6, maybe 7, beautiful smile, brown hair, bright eyes, and the way Adam looked at her. I've never forgotten it, never. Because that wasn't the look of a man visiting someone's child. That wasn't the look of an uncle, or family friend, or neighbor. That was a father, there was no doubt. None. The expression on his face made it undeniable. Love, pure love. The kind that can't be faked. The kind that exists long before cameras appear. My hands started shaking, because suddenly I knew not everything, but enough to understand the impossible. Adam had a daughter I'd never heard about, a daughter he'd somehow hidden for years. Then I looked closer, and noticed the woman standing beside them. The woman had her arm wrapped around Adam's waist, comfortable, natural, intimate, like she'd done it 1,000 times. I didn't recognize her, which somehow made things worse. The photo looked recent, very recent, and suddenly the room felt too small, too quiet, too wrong. I placed the photograph on the bed and stared at it, trying desperately to make sense of the timeline. 12 years of marriage, 14 years together. When exactly had this happened? Before me, during me, both, nothing fit, nothing made sense. Then I remembered something, Pine Grove. The town mentioned by Adam's former co-worker. My heart immediately started racing again. Pine Grove, for some reason that name suddenly mattered. A lot. I grabbed my laptop, opened a search engine, typed the words. Pine Grove appeared 40 minutes away. 40, not another state, not another country, 40 minutes, close enough to visit regularly, close enough to maintain a secret, close enough to hide in plain sight. The realization felt like being punched. Because suddenly every business trip, every mysterious phone call, every unexplained absence, every strange receipt started connecting. The pieces weren't complete yet, but the picture was emerging, and I hated what I was seeing. Then I found the envelope. The envelope changed everything. It sat inside a drawer in Adam's home office. Plain white envelope, nothing unusual, until I opened it. Inside was a utility bill, not our address, different address, Pine Grove. I stared at it, reading it repeatedly. The account holder's name made my blood run cold. Adam, not a company, not a business. Adam, my husband. The utility bill wasn't recent either. The account had existed for years. Years. I sat back in his chair, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand how one human being could maintain two completely separate lives. Then my phone buzzed. Adam, calling. The timing nearly made me laugh. Almost. I stared at his name. Let it ring. Then ring again, then stop. A text message arrived seconds later. How was Seattle? My hands clenched immediately. Seattle. The trip he thought I was still on. The trip he thought would keep me away for 3 more days. The trip that allowed his secret life to exist safely. Except I wasn't in Seattle anymore. I was sitting inside the ruins of my marriage, surrounded by evidence, surrounded by lies, surrounded by a life that apparently belonged to someone else. For the first time in 14 years, I didn't know who my husband was. The scariest part, I hadn't even uncovered the truth yet. Not really, because the little girl, she was real. The second house, also real. The other woman, very real. But none of those things were the biggest secret. Not even close. The biggest secret was still waiting for me in Pine Grove, and when I finally drove there, I would discover something that made the affair seem almost insignificant. Because Adam wasn't just cheating, he wasn't just maintaining a second family. Somehow, the truth was even worse. I didn't call Adam back, not immediately. For 14 years I'd answered every call, every text, every emergency, every inconvenience. For the first time in our relationship I ignored him, and honestly, it felt strange, very strange. Because when you're married to someone, that long responding becomes automatic. Muscle memory, habit, love, whatever you want to call it. But as I sat in his office staring at that utility bill from Pine Grove, something inside me was changing. Rapidly, the trust was gone, and without trust every memory suddenly looks different. My phone buzzed again, another text. Everything okay? I almost laughed. The irony was unbelievable. Everything okay? No, Adam. Everything was definitely not okay. But instead of answering, I did something smarter. I started taking pictures. Lots of pictures. The utility bill, the photograph, the child's drawing, the medicine, the backpack, everything. Because some instinct told me this wasn't over. Not even close. And instincts had been trying to save me for years. I just hadn't listened. By the time I finished documenting everything, it was nearly 6 o'clock. The sun was beginning to set. The house felt darker, heavier, almost haunted. Then I made a decision. I was going to Pine Grove. Right then, not tomorrow, not next week. Now, because if I waited I'd lose my nerve, or worse, Adam would discover I knew something. 40 minutes later I was driving through Pine Grove. Small town, quiet streets, local diners, family-owned businesses, the kind of place where everybody probably knows everybody. Not exactly ideal for keeping secrets, yet somehow Adam had managed. For years, the address from the utility bill led me to a modest 2-story house near the edge of town. Nothing extravagant, white siding, blue shutters, small front yard, swing set. My stomach dropped the second I saw the swing set. Because suddenly everything became real, painfully real. This wasn't a fantasy. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't a misunderstanding. There was a child, a real child, living a real life, and somehow my husband was connected to her. I parked across the street, heart pounding, hands shaking, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to drive away. Part of me wanted to storm across the lawn. Instead I sat there, watching. Then the front door opened, and my entire world shattered. Adam stepped outside. Adam, my husband, the man who thought I was still in Seattle, the man who was supposedly working late, the man who had spent 14 years sharing a bed with me. He looked completely comfortable. completely relaxed, like he belonged there. Then the little girl appeared, the same little girl from the photograph. She ran toward him smiling, and Adam immediately picked her up, like he'd done it 1,000 times. The sight physically hurt. Not because I wanted children, not because I was jealous, because of the intimacy, the familiarity, the routine. This wasn't a secret visit, this wasn't a weekend fling. This was family. Then another person appeared, a woman, mid-30s, dark hair, jeans, sweater, beautiful in a very normal way, not glamorous, not flashy, just real. And when she walked outside, Adam kissed her. Not a quick kiss, not an awkward kiss, a comfortable kiss, the kind married couples exchange automatically, the kind born from routine, the kind that says, I've done this every day for years. My vision blurred. For a moment I genuinely thought I might faint, because suddenly the impossible truth became unavoidable. Adam wasn't living a double life. He was living 2 complete lives, 2 homes, 2 relationships, 2 families, and somehow he'd managed to keep them separate. For years. The question was how. How does one person hide something this enormous? The answer arrived sooner than expected. Because while I sat there watching, my phone rang. Again. Adam. I stared at the screen, then looked across the street. At Adam, standing beside another woman holding another child, calling me. The level of deception was almost impressive. Almost. I answered for the first time all day. Hey. His voice sounded normal, completely normal, the voice of a loving husband, a loyal husband, a husband who wasn't currently standing with another family 40 yards away. Hey. I kept my voice steady. Somehow you still in Seattle. There it was, the lie, delivered effortlessly, without hesitation, without guilt, without anything, and suddenly I understood something horrifying. Adam had been doing this for so long that lying felt natural. Like breathing, like blinking, like existing. Yeah, I lied too, the word tasted awful. Good trip. I looked directly at him while he spoke. He smiled at the little girl, ruffled her hair, then told me, I miss you, miss you. The cruelty of that sentence nearly broke me, not because I believed it, because I once would have, and that realization hurt, a lot. The conversation lasted 3 minutes, 3 unbearable minutes. When it ended, I sat frozen, unable to move, unable to think. Then something happened that made the situation even stranger. The little girl pointed toward my car. My heart stopped, instantly, because children notice everything. She pointed, said something. Adam turned, looked directly toward me. For a split second I thought everything was over. I thought he'd recognize my car, recognize me, recognize something. Instead he looked away. Apparently the distance was enough, or maybe he simply wasn't expecting me. Either way I remained invisible. For now I drove away shortly afterward, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't handle any more. My brain had reached capacity. The drive home felt surreal, like I was watching somebody else's life, not mine, some stranger's nightmare. Yet every mile brought the same realization. This wasn't just cheating. Cheating would have been simpler. This required planning, coordination, maintenance, years of lies, years. When I finally reached home, exhaustion hit me like a truck. I collapsed onto the couch, still wearing my coat, still holding my phone, still trying to understand how 14 years of marriage could suddenly feel fictional. Then another question appeared, a worse question, a much worse question. What if the other woman didn't know? The possibility froze me, because I'd spent hours assuming she was Adam's partner in deception. But what if she wasn't? What if she believed she was the wife, the legitimate relationship, the real family? The thought changed everything, because if that was true, then there were 2 victims, not one. I needed answers, real answers, not assumptions, not guesses. Answers. The next morning I called in sick. Then I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. The conversation felt ridiculous, like something from a television show. Yet 3 days later the investigator called me back. And what he told me made the situation infinitely worse, because according to his findings, the woman in Pine Grove wasn't Adam's mistress. Not exactly. In fact, she'd been with Adam longer than I had, and that revelation was only the beginning. The private investigator called me Thursday morning. I remember because I hadn't slept. Not really. For 3 days I'd been surviving on coffee, anxiety, and pure disbelief. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adam standing outside that house, holding that little girl, kissing that woman, living a life that apparently had nothing to do with me. The phone rang around 9:30. I answered immediately. The investigator didn't waste time. I found something. His tone alone made my stomach drop. Not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded careful, like someone choosing words very deliberately. What is it? A long pause, then. I think your husband has been using 2 different identities. Silence, complete silence. Because my brain literally refused to process the sentence. What? I think the man you know as Adam isn't using his original name. For a few seconds I genuinely thought there'd been some kind of mistake. Wrong file, wrong person, wrong investigation, something, anything, because people don't just change identities, not normal people, not husbands, not men you've shared 14 years with. Apparently mine did. The investigator continued. Years earlier, Adam had legally changed his surname. Not illegal, not criminal, people do it all the time. The strange part wasn't the change itself. The strange part was how thoroughly he'd erased the previous version of himself. Different records, different history, different connections, like someone trying very hard to separate two lives. Then the investigator said something that made my blood run cold. The woman in Pine Grove knows him by his original name. I sat down immediately, because suddenly nothing made sense anymore, or maybe everything did. The man I'd married wasn't just maintaining two relationships. He'd built two completely different identities, two different versions of himself, two different worlds. The investigator eventually gave me a name, the name that existed before Adam, the name used in Pine Grove, the name attached to old records, old addresses, old documents, a completely different life. Then came the worst part. The woman in Pine Grove wasn't a mistress, not in the traditional sense. According to everything the investigator uncovered, she believed she was Adam's only partner, just like I did. My chest tightened, because suddenly the story changed. Completely, this wasn't wife versus mistress, this wasn't some affair triangle. This was two women being lied to simultaneously. For years, the investigator continued talking. I barely heard half of it: property records, employment history, financial information, timelines, everything blurred together. Then one sentence cut through the noise. She has no idea you exist. Silence, absolute silence. I stared at the wall, unable to move, unable to think. Because I'd spent days imagining this woman as my enemy. The other woman, the homewrecker, the accomplice, turns out she was another victim, just like me, maybe worse because she had a child involved. A child who loved Adam, trusted Adam, called him daddy, and apparently had no idea any of this existed. The investigator asked if I wanted his full report. I said yes, then spent the next hour reading through 30 pages of information. Every page hurt, every page revealed another lie, every page destroyed another piece of my marriage. Adam hadn't been traveling for work nearly as often as he claimed. Many of those trips simply connected the two lives. The conferences, the meetings, the late nights, most were excuses. Carefully designed excuses. The logistics alone were unbelievable. Birthdays, holidays, vacations, schedules, everything had been engineered, meticulously. The level of planning made me feel sick, because accidental lies are one thing. This required commitment, years of commitment. Then I found the timeline. The timeline broke me. According to the records, Adam met the woman in Pine Grove before he met me, before me. I read the date 3 times, then a 4th, then a 5th, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. She came first, years first. The implication hit me instantly. I wasn't the original relationship. I was the second one, the secret, not her, me. The realization felt like the floor disappearing beneath me. For 14 years I'd believed I was the wife, the primary relationship, the center of his life. Instead I was one half of a carefully managed deception. One half, then something else emerged. The little girl wasn't 6 or 7, she was 8. And the timeline made that impossible to ignore. Adam had been actively living both lives while raising a child, simultaneously. The thought made me physically ill, because children complicate everything. Children make selfish decisions even uglier. Then I noticed a phone number in the report, the woman's phone number. I stared at it for a very long time. Hours, actually, because I knew what came next. Eventually we would meet. Eventually we would talk. Eventually the truth would collide with reality. The only question was when. And honestly, I was terrified because what do you even say? Hello, I've been married to your partner for 14 years, nice to meet you. The absurdity was overwhelming. Yet the conversation had to happen, it absolutely had to happen. So the following day I called. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. The call connected, a woman answered, friendly voice, normal voice. The voice of somebody living an ordinary life, a life that was about to explode. Hello, I almost hung up, actually almost, then I forced myself to speak. Hi, my voice sounded strange, weak, unfamiliar. My name is Rebecca. Silence, then, okay. I swallowed, hard, then delivered the sentence that changed both our lives. I think we're involved with the same man. The The silence that followed lasted forever. At least it felt that way. Then she laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. I understood. A week earlier I would have reacted exactly the same way. The conversation lasted 2 hours, 2 unbelievable hours. By the end, both of us were crying, because every answer created 10 new questions. Her name was Emily, 37 years old, teacher, mother, kind, genuinely kind, and completely devastated. The more we talked, the worse everything became. Adam used different stories with each of us, different explanations, different work schedules, different histories, different timelines. The lies were customized, tailored, designed specifically for each life, which somehow made them even more disturbing. Then Emily told me something that chilled me. For years, she'd suspected something wasn't right. Not another woman specifically, just something: missing weekends, unusual absences, contradictions, tiny details. The same details I'd noticed, the same details I'd ignored. Apparently both of us had spent years questioning reality. While Adam calmly manipulated both versions, then Emily showed me photographs. Hundreds of photographs, birthdays, Christmases, vacations, family moments, an entire life, a complete life. The worst part, Adam looked happy, not stressed, not conflicted, happy, genuinely happy, like a man living exactly the life he wanted. That realization hurt more than the cheating, because it meant the lies weren't a burden, they were a choice. Then Emily showed me something else, a photograph taken nearly 10 years earlier, and suddenly everything clicked. Everything, because in the background of that photograph, barely visible, was me, at a public event, standing across a street, completely unaware. The two worlds had crossed years ago. Years, and neither of us noticed. The realization was terrifying. How many times had we almost discovered each other? How many near misses existed? How many close calls? Apparently dozens. Maybe hundreds. Then Emily said something that launched the final chapter of the story. Something simple, something obvious, something inevitable. We need to confront him. Silence. Then I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Because she was right. No more guessing, no more investigating, no more theories, no more secrets. The time for truth had finally arrived. The problem for Adam, he still thought his worlds were safely separated. He still believed Rebecca existed over here, Emily existed over there, and never the two would meet. He had absolutely no idea we were already talking, already sharing evidence, already comparing timelines, already preparing. For 14 years he'd controlled the story. Now the story was about to control him, and when the confrontation finally happened, every lie he'd ever told would come crashing down at once. The strange thing about betrayal is that eventually the pain turns into clarity. Not healing, not peace, clarity. For weeks after speaking with Emily, I barely cried anymore. The shock was gone. The confusion was gone. Even the denial was gone. What remained was certainty. Adam had lied to both of us. For years, not one mistake, not one affair, not one bad decision. Thousands of deliberate choices, every day, every week, every year. And now those choices were finally catching up to him. The first time Emily and I met in person felt surreal. We chose a small cafe halfway between our towns, neutral territory. Neither of us knew what to expect. I remember arriving early, nervous, anxious, curious. Then Emily walked through the door. And for a moment we just stared at each other, not because we hated each other, because we recognized something. The exhaustion, the confusion, the grief. We were looking at another version of ourselves, another victim, another life Adam had damaged. The weirdest part, I liked her immediately, which somehow made everything worse, because it would have been easier if she'd been awful, cruel, manipulative, arrogant. Instead she was kind, warm, normal. Exactly the type of person I'd probably be friends with under different circumstances. We talked for nearly 4 hours, comparing timelines, comparing stories, comparing lies, and every answer made the situation uglier. Apparently Adam told Emily he worked for a company that required constant travel. That explained his absences. Meanwhile, he told me his travel happened because of corporate expansion. Different lies, same purpose. He celebrated holidays with both families, maintained separate traditions, separate routines, separate memories. The logistics were unbelievable. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmases, school events, vacations. How one human being managed it for 14 years remains a mystery. Then Emily showed me something that broke my heart, a recent video of her daughter, Sophia, 8 years old, missing front tooth, messy hair, bright smile, completely innocent. In the video she was talking excitedly about Adam. Her father, the man she adored, the man she trusted completely, the man who'd built his entire world on lies. Watching that video hurt more than anything Adam had done to me. Because adults survive betrayal, children carry it, the thought haunted me for days. Then Emily asked a question neither of us wanted to answer. When do we tell him? Silence, long silence, because once confrontation happened, there was no going back, no more uncertainty, no more investigation. Everything would become real. Finally, I answered. Soon, very soon. Over the next week we planned everything. Not revenge, not humiliation, truth, simple truth. We gathered evidence, photographs, records, messages, documents, timelines, everything, because one thing became obvious. Adam wasn't just a liar, he was an expert liar. And expert liars survive through confusion. Facts destroy confusion. We intended to bring facts. The confrontation happened 2 Saturdays later, and honestly, nothing could have prepared me for it. Emily invited Adam to her house. Normal weekend, normal visit, nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, I arrived 20 minutes early and waited inside. The plan was simple. No drama, no screaming, no surprises beyond the obvious, just reality. When Adam pulled into the driveway, my heart started pounding. 14 years of marriage. And somehow this moment felt bigger than all of them. The front door opened. Adam walked inside smiling, holding a gift bag, probably for Sophia. The smile disappeared immediately because he saw me, standing in the living room. For a few seconds nobody moved, nobody spoke. The silence felt endless. Then Adam went pale, completely pale, like all the blood left his body at once. And in that exact moment, I knew, not suspected, knew he'd never expected this day, not really. People like Adam always believe they'll stay ahead of consequences until they don't. Then Emily stepped into the room, and suddenly all three of us stood there together. The entire lie, the entire secret, the entire double life. Finally occupying the same space, Adam looked trapped because he was. Rebecca, his voice barely worked. Then Emily, like saying our names would somehow fix reality. It didn't. Nobody answered. For the first time in years, Adam had no script. No prepared explanation, no separate stories, no safe version of reality, just truth, raw truth. Then he did something incredible. He lied again, immediately, even now, even standing between both women, even caught completely. His first instinct was another lie. I actually laughed. The sound shocked everyone, including me, because it was absurd, absolutely absurd. I held up the folder containing the evidence, photographs, documents, records, everything. The lies died instantly. For nearly 30 minutes Adam tried explaining context, misunderstandings, complicated circumstances, feelings, fear, every excuse imaginable. Nothing worked because the evidence was overwhelming. Eventually the truth emerged, not all at once, piece by piece. Adam met Emily first. Years before me, their relationship struggled, separated temporarily, never officially ended. Then he met me, fell in love, or believed he did. Instead of choosing one life, he chose both. At first he intended to fix it later, then later became months, months became years, years became a decade, and eventually the lie became too large to escape, so he maintained it, again and again. And again, listening to his explanation felt surreal, because every sentence basically translated into one thing: I didn't want consequences. That's it, that was the foundation of everything. Selfishness, pure selfishness. Then the worst moment arrived. Sophia came home. Nobody planned that, nobody wanted that, but life rarely respects timing. The second she walked through the door she sensed something was wrong. Children always know. She looked at Adam, then me. Then Emily, confused, uncertain, scared. And suddenly the situation became heartbreaking because betrayal is ugly. Watching a child collide with betrayal is worse, much worse. Emily immediately took her into another room. The conversation that followed stayed private, as it should, but the sound of Sophia crying drifted down the hallway, and honestly, that was the moment Adam finally broke, not when he got caught, not when the lies collapsed. When he heard his daughter crying, that's when reality finally reached him. Then came the aftermath, the long aftermath, the boring aftermath, the real aftermath, because dramatic confrontations make great stories. Consequences happen afterward. Over months, over years, Adam lost both relationships immediately, completely. There was no coming back from 14 years of deception, no apology large enough, no explanation good enough, no repair possible. The damage was too extensive. Emily focused on Sophia, protecting her, helping her heal, helping her understand. I admired her for that, truly. As for me, I filed for divorce, the easiest decision of my life, not because it wasn't painful, because there was nothing left to save. The marriage I'd been protecting never actually existed. It was a performance, and performances end. The legal process took months, then it ended too. The strangest thing happened afterward. Freedom, real freedom, not happiness, not immediately. Freedom, for the first time in years, reality matched truth. No secrets, no confusion, no hidden rooms, no second lives, just truth. And truth, even painful truth, is surprisingly peaceful. 3 years later I received a letter, actual letter. Handwritten from Adam. I almost threw it away, almost. Instead I read it. The contents didn't matter much: regret, apologies, responsibility, the usual things people discover after consequences arrive. One sentence stood out though, just one. I spent 14 years trying to keep everything and ended up losing everything. For once, he wasn't lying. That's exactly what happened. The man who wanted 2 lives ended up with neither. The man who refused to choose lost both choices. The man who built everything on deception watched it collapse. And honestly, that wasn't revenge, that was mathematics. Eventually life balances itself, not perfectly, but eventually. Today my life looks very different, quieter, healthier, real. I still think about those 14 years sometimes, not with anger anymore, mostly with disbelief, because the greatest lesson wasn't about cheating, or marriage, or lies. It was this: people can hide who they are for a surprisingly long time. But they can't hide forever. Eventually truth arrives, eventually masks crack, eventually reality wins. It always does. And when I think back to that pink backpack hanging beside my front door, I realize something. It wasn't the thing that destroyed my life. It was the thing that gave it back, because for the first time in 14 years, I finally saw the truth, and once you see the truth, you can never be trapped by the lie again.